And we bring to you today a beloved guest. And that beloved guest is Shaykh Shams, and I should say, Mullah. Shams Tameez. Why do I say that? Because he is a Maturidi, and he is a carrier of the tradition that is beyond the river. And you guys know what the phrase beyond the river is in Islamic scholarship? Ma wara an-nahr. It's the Oxus River, not the Tigris. Ya gala. It's the Oxus River that's way out there, and it comes with a very unique, special Persianate tradition, and he is the keeper of that tradition in the country of England and in Turkey where he lives, and he runs a course that you should all take so that you could become educated in Aqidah to produce what we want to do, which is confident Muslims. Let's bring him on. Welcome to the Nothing But Facts live stream. Shaykh Shams and Tameez. كيف حالك?
Alhamdulillah, Sayyidi. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for having me and your kind words.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Let's get straight to the point, and let me ask you about where you are in England and about the riots. That's the first thing I want to ask about.
Allahu Akbar. Well, I live in High Wycombe. High Wycombe is my hometown, just on the west of London, so in the south of the country. It's not a dirty south the way it is in America, but it is the south. Alhamdulillah. And yeah, the riots have been a roller coaster. They've been an interesting roller coaster, multi-layered. I think there's a lot of politicking taking place that people are overlooking, but definitely it's been quite a roller coaster.
And in High Wycombe, were there mashakil?
No, there was. I think the English Defence League did put out a post that they were coming to High Wycombe, which has traditionally been a Tory town, a conservative town, but not this term because Labour's come into power. But I think there was about 6 or 7 of them that turned up. There were more anti-protesters or rioters than there were actual protesters.
And the Muslims around these areas, are they forming committees to protect their homes and masajid and neighborhoods?
Well, I think one of the things with High Wycombe is we do have a large Muslim population, but also we have really good relationships with the community in general. So the mosque outreach is generally very good. Everyone knows everyone, the neighbours, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. So it was never going to be a big show. The EDO coming to Wycombe is really just a waste of their train tickets.
Waste of time. When I came to England, was that High Wycombe where we went, where we were together?
Yeah. When you came to High Wycombe.
So there was a school there, public school. Just to give people an idea of some of the places in England. This school, while you walk in the school, you just say, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. It's as if you walked in an Islamic school, but it's in fact a public school. And the area, I'm not even joking or exaggerating, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, must have been over 70% Muslims.
Yep.
Right?
Yep,
and so they don't need to make Islamic schools there, right? The whole school is Muslim. I'm sure they give them accommodations such as halal food for lunch. Otherwise, no one would eat lunch.
Yep.
They can't have Islamic studies classes in the school, but right when the final bell rings, they have an after-school program. The kid stays an extra 40 minutes and learns Hanafi fiqh, right? And Quran and Qasas and Nabiyyin and everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. When we want to build a confident Muslim, is my first question. What do you think is more important, identity or ilm?
Allah. So I should be asking you these questions if I'm honest, but I'll maybe start off with just a muqaddimah, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think identity that is guided through ilm is going to be an identity that brings confidence. I think the big problem actually that we probably have is because there's been a lacking of ilm for so long, you've had this sort of identity crisis that we've had. I think there's a term for it in academia now, which is post-war on terror generation, which is in the immediate aftermath of let's say 9/11. Obviously, we had 7/7 here in England. In that time, we all remember it, the war on terror, etc. All you ever heard from Muslims was, how do we respond? How do we defend Islam? There's no opportunity for creative thinking and growth because you're just trying to defend yourself. And so I think at that point it was, are you British? Are you Muslim? There was this real cognitive dissonance amongst Muslims. And so I think there was a lot of bending over, a lot of breaking of rules, a lot of non-kosher or non-halal type of ideas, etc. that crept in. So I think identity has to be rooted in ilm. Something that you said off camera that was amazing, which is it's not just about having ilm of the tradition, but it's really being well aware of all. And this is a cliche now, to know your surroundings. No, but I think really to be aware. To understand the psychology of one's people, to understand where you're at, your own lived experiences, to appreciate the subtleties and complexities of
Yep.
human psychology. And I think all of that is very important. So I think ilm has to come first. I think if I'm running a program, I want my kids, I want my young people, I want adults, I want them to be very clear on what Islam is, who they are, what their place in the universe is, and then they have to understand that in their actual context.
100%. After 9/11, the most energized people were the ones who had the biggest inferiority complexes and were just dying to be accepted. And they took over for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were the most energized. They were like running to be accepted, so they ran to the left out of fear of the right. And secondly, they were used. They were politically used as pawns, as people who here's our, us helping Muslims, and here's a Muslim escaping from Islamic, trappings and strictures or what have you. So they're used in both ways. So that though has run its course. It's ran its course. They've shown to be bereft of any benefit, and in fact, got nothing except some token, token observances from the political parties anyway. Like we didn't get anything from you guys. So I think in a lot of ways, that's run its course, and now I think things went the opposite side, with Muslims joining the right, thinking that for somehow that's going to benefit them, because we do share a little bit of commonalities regarding the disgust with transgenderism and stuff like that, and even the dislike of some of their cultural what they're promoting culturally. But that should run its course too, with these people being 100% Zionist. Right? These guys are 110% Zionist. Like if the Zionists right now were to nuke the whole that part of the world, these guys would support it 110%. So
it's interesting. Yeah. Sorry, one of the things I will say is that the left will never kill you, but they'll corrode your faith, and the right they won't corrode your faith, but they'll kill you. Yeah. And so pick your poison.
You could die a shaheed with the right, or live as a munafiq, a zindiq with the left. Those are your options, right? If taken to the most extreme, those are the extremes, literally. Die a shaheed with the right, or live as zindiq with the left, right? And the zindiq is a heretic whose beliefs are completely incompatible with Islam. So I also want to point that Muslims are small in number, so they sort of move with the trends, even within Islam. So when the right rose up in the past 8 years, Muslims shifted right. Some Muslims shifted right. And you can see that in social media. But now I think the right's going to crack. Like Trump's lost, it's broken now. And they're talking about the MAGA civil war. There's little whispers about it, and you could see the cracks. So now we've tried out the left and see that failed. Tried the right, that failed. Or leaned, I should say. We're like a tree that leans. Some people lean too much and break. But now where are we headed now? Along, hopefully, your own identity. You realize what we've been saying actually on the Safina Saadi podcast from 2016. You have no friends. بين فرث ودم لبنا خالصة. Now that comes to us in terms of, if you have knowledge of your deen, you would have known that from the start. Tell us, what do you believe is the top, let's say, 3 most important elements of knowledge that will make a Muslim confident going forward and living in the West?
SubhanAllah. Allahu A'lam awalan, but I would say that first and foremost, I think people's aqeedah has to be really, really clear. They have to understand. And what I mean by that is, when people feel like, oh, what's going to happen? People have to have tawakkul.
Yep.
And you can't have tawakkul if you don't truly appreciate what tawheed is. So I think really understanding, imbibing that moment where Abraham is thrown, alayhi salam, into the fire, and seeks Allah's help and Allah's help alone. I think, we sort of say that as a story, but there's a deep aqidah there, which is that ultimately everything is happening in the knowledge of God and with His will. And so I think imbibing that's one thing. So I think a clear aqidah, because there's barakah that comes with sound aqidah. I think batil aqaid are never going to help you.
Yeah.
So your aqidah has to be clear. I think the other thing that's really, really important is, I think, I'll tell you, I don't know what it's like in America. I don't know what it's like in other places of the world. But as somebody that grew up in England with a subcontinental culture that came with the diaspora, every speech I ever heard from a Maulana, every talk, every dars, it was centered around the Holy Prophet ﷺ. He was
Sallallahu
central.
alayhi wasallam.
He was central in everything. Every gathering was a mawlid, right? And everything was about the Prophet. It was about sacrifice, fidaka ya Rasulullah, bi abi wa ummi ya Rasulullah. It was, and now someone could think, oh, what is this? You're just talking in this, emotional and no. If you want people to have thibat upon deen, if you look at the Sahaba, they would open a letter from the Prophet ﷺ hundreds of miles away and say, labbaik ya Rasulullah. Like for them, it was about sacrificing for the Prophet. So I think if there's one thing that has probably helped a lot of people in my generation, and may Allah Ta'ala give us husn al-khatima, a good ending,
Ameen,
is what helped a lot of people was the Prophet, was knowing that he was there and being committed to him and to his mission. So I think second to a sound aqidah, or maybe even in some ways greater, because it'll help you in your aqidah, is really to make the Prophet central, that everything is for him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that he's your role model. This is why, I did a talk and some people got upset with it. Well, I was talking about some people that you have in America. I don't want to mention names, perhaps maybe we can. Certain influencers, certain powerful people, and so all these Muslims, for their masculinity or whatever it may be, they run into these influences. And I said then, and this is quite a while back, that you're going to get burnt. The reason being is because لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Really, your only role model is the Prophet ﷺ. He's the only one. We don't need a greater man than him ﷺ. Like he is the rajul of all rijal, right? And so he is the role model ﷺ. And there'll be our tafawut, the differences between us are how much we match him. So I think that's second or number two. I'm not saying it's in order. That's really important. And I think third thing is suhbah, that your ilm you can't be an autodidact. Maybe in some fun, but not in your deen. Like there's one thing to transmit a particular science like nahu, like grammar, but there's another thing to transmit the religion as a whole, as a fikr, as a manhaj. And I think suhbah with the ulama, righteous ulama, is extremely important because you learn adab.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sure that could become a whole topic as well. But you learn adab. So I think those three things, that if I personally believe, is your aqidah has to be sound. Number two, the Prophet has to be central in your life. Number three, you have to have, those are rijal that you are seeking, they have to be your teachers. They have to be the ulama, the rabbaniyin, those that lead by example. And I think that those are the things that kept our religion alive up until this day. I think up until this day, the ummah always shared in these three things.
Would you consider it accurate that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love of the messenger, peace be upon him, actually should be a prerequisite to studying aqidah? Because you won't get so far if you think you're just studying theory, but you will get really far if you love the subject of your study. And what is the best way to inculcate that love?
Well, لا أدري, but I'll say one thing, Sayyidi. I remember when I was in Tareem, we were reading after Fajr Qawaid al-Aqaid with Sayyidi al-Habib Umar bin Hafiz, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. And this is an Aqidah text of Imam al-Ghazali, a short one, but it's Aqidah. And I remember, and I'm not just saying this is without any ghulu, and I remember thinking to myself, was this a dars of Aqidah or a dars of Tasawwuf? And I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
Like when he was explaining, I remember he was explaining the term hadith, which is for something to be contingent, essentially, or originated. And he went into this idea of how are you comparing God, I can't even repeat what he said. How are you comparing essentially God to things that are originated? Their asl is nothing. Their asl is
Subhanallah.
that they didn't exist. But it was the dhawq. I don't know how to
Subhanallah.
translate these terms. It was that dhawq, that spiritual prowess that he possessed, that I walked out spiritually charged. But we were just reading an Aqidah text. So and Sheikh Abdul Hakim once said, there's a quote from him that I think he said to the effect that an academic can speak many, many words and not change himself, but the saint can change an entire nation with just his state. And I think
Subhanallah.
people think this is very cliche, but I don't think it's cliche. I think it's very true.
I think that the in being those awliya that are love is so inflamed in them, they're like on fire all the time with that love of Allah and His Messenger that has come to them through the sanad. It doesn't come out of nothing. It comes because
No,
you sat with others. They were in love. They sat with others. That love is passed on by torches, not through books and words. It's a torch, a baton that's passed through the rijal of Allah Ta'ala. And one person may receive multiple torches, so his flame becomes bigger than all of them, right? And that's
Allah,
how you have a mujaddid, right? Because he received from 50 torches, added them all together, they became one huge torch. Like Imam Malik, right, was like this. He was himself a mountain, but he wasn't a bid'ah amongst his people. He was just saying what they said, but he had gathered so much. And so you get every once in a while someone who gathers so much fire, and as Allah gave him more tawfiq, and you shouldn't actually use fire, but say the flame of mahabba. But if they teach you tayammum,
Allah,
you'll walk away transformed, because they will bring you ma'arif, hikam, and show you the rahmah of Allah Ta'ala and His ibad, and they'll draw analogies with turab and ma, because we purify ourselves with turab and ma, and we're made from turab and ma. Like they'll bring you ma'arif, they'll bring you hikam. Ma'arif means like things related to the divine and His creation in this world. And you'll walk away like as if you just came out of a majlis of tasawwuf,
Allah,
right? Because everything, if I think if they taught you how to cook food, everything, because it's like, as you said, it's the state. It's not an academic approach to things. It's their spiritual state. Spiritual state is a big fancy word, but really what it means is a love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is, and the love of the Messenger, peace be upon him, that they took from their teachers, and they increased, gave it more oxygen by constant exposure to Allah's attributes, to the Prophet's seerah and shama'il. And
sallallahu
that's
alaihi
really
wasallam.
what people need. Yeah.
You know what, can I say something, Sayyidi?
Yeah.
One of our Mashaykh, Sayyid Hasinuddin, I remember he was giving a dars of Bukhari, and he's an elderly man,
Yeah.
and he has some of the highest asanid in hadith. And he mentioned the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, lifted his two fingers, and he
Yeah.
said that hakada, like me and that person are going to be like these two fingers. And he said some scholars have said
Yeah.
that he put his two fingers like this, and some said like this, and some said like this.
Subhanallah.
But you know what he did in the dars?
Yeah.
He sat on his hand. When he taught the hadith, he sat on his hand, and he said, just so I don't forget, and I do a gesture with my fingers that the Prophet didn't actually do, and I lie
Subhanallah.
against the Prophet. So when he would teach that hadith, he used to sit on his hand just in case he
Ajib.
mistakenly doesn't do it. So it's like you're
Subhanallah.
learning a hadith, but you're learning what that means from these people. And I think one issue here is, I don't know, Sheikh Muhammad Shuqair from Sham. Sheikh Muhammad Shuqair is one of the leading Shafi'i. He studied directly with the likes of Sheikh Hassan Habannaka and Sheikh Mullah Ramadan Bhuti, Sheikh Saeed's father. And he taught us Bajuri Sharh on the Shama'il in Istanbul. And whenever he would mention the Prophet's name, he would cry. Like, I have my audios on my phone that I recorded with the Durus. It's just him crying the entire dars. So he's
Subhanallah.
teaching me something. It's academic because it's a hadith in that sense. But what I'm learning, what I'm taking from him, is something completely different.
Yeah.
And I think when we're speaking like this, you're going to get somebody that's going to sit there and say, "Oh, this is just Sufi goofy, some sort of this strange," because we're so deeply material, and I really mean this. We're so deeply reductive in our understanding of religion, etc., that these things sound weird and abnormal. as opposed to these things being the driving force behind all of the khair of what's happened before us in terms of the spread of Islam. And it was always this deep spiritual state that led the way. But it somehow seems ajib. Maybe this is the ghuraba. I don't know. Like when they say gharib, they think it just means that you're going to look different. What does looking different mean? You know, what does that mean? But maybe that you will actually sound gharib because in a deeply material, reductive world, you are speaking about something immaterial and something of a higher purpose.
How about the innovation of academia is the separation of ilm from amal, right? So when you study Islam in an academic environment, the whole process and taking those courses with those teachers, with the rules of those universities, we have to say, does it have a ruling, and is that ruling for prohibition? Because this is a massive innovation to say we will read and study without taking any positions, without advising ourselves, without advising one another to act upon what we're reading and considering haqq. So you're going to sit in a room and study the Quran with an admission that you cannot say it is haqq. Is this not the greatest of bid'ah? Right? This has to be the greatest of bid'ah. And innovations in how we study, misguided innovations, and even leads to nifaq, because that's what a munafiq does. He doesn't act upon it. He doesn't feel anything inside of him. So that approach to Islam and Sharia is a problem. And when you take from people, you can sit with people who are guided and never read a single letter of knowledge and end up in a better state than somebody who read a lot of books but never sat with people. What's the reason? Is that people show you the application of knowledge. So books don't show you the application. So you're going to wing the application. You're going to wing it, and you probably do something wrong. And that's why sitting with people is the core of what Islam is. And it takes us to the point that I would venture to say that Muslims, the history of Islam in the last 500 years, we've lost every battle, yet we continue to win the war.
SubhanAllah.
In the grand scheme of things, Muslims have lost every single battle, maybe for the last 500 years or less, right? 400 years, who knows? But why are we still winning the war? Why is everyone worried about Muslims? How do you have, in the worst political century, 1924 to 2024, it's got to be the worst political century Muslims ever had. Yet you end up with over 100 million Muslims in Western countries? How does that happen? So I'll tell you how it happens is that the religion works for the individual, the family, and the neighborhood. It's still working for the individual and the family and the neighborhood. The bottom of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid is the body politic, the nation, and their armies. Well, that's corrupted. But the broad part, the granular element is still working. So you'll see Islam being practiced in England, being practiced in parts of France. You'll see it affecting homes and families living by this everywhere in the globe. You just won't see them coming together and forming a body politic because they can't do that at this point. Take the West, for example. They're the total opposite. They win every battle. They got the strongest governments, the strongest militaries. They control the economy, yet they're losing. They're losing their own kids. They're losing their own societies are crumbling. It's the exact opposite of what's happening to Islam right now. And that's because Islam did not come with a political plan, a blueprint, and all that. Yes, it does have those elements. We have khilaf and all that. But it essentially came for the individual as well.
SubhanAllah.
To fix you, to fix your family, to fix the needy, to fix your neighbor, all that stuff. And that's what the monoculture of the world is not bringing any solutions to that. In fact, it's corrupting that. So when we talk about the confidence that Muslims have, it has to be, as you just said, connected to companionship and suhbah, which leads now to the next question. I'm listening to your stream. Where do I get this suhbah from?
Allahu Akbar. From Dr. Shadee, You can go to New Jersey and you can benefit, as many have. One of the things Sheikh Abdul Hakim once said is that he said to make a dua after Maghrib, that if somebody wanted to find people or somebody that will help them in their journey, that to make dua after Maghrib. اللهم دلني على من يدلني عليك وأوصلني إلى من يوصلني إليك. A rough translation of that would be, oh Allah, point me to the one that will point me to you and make me reach the one that will make me reach you. And we make dua to Allah for lots of things. Why not make dua to him for suhbah? And again, I'm not trying to, but we have, alhamdulillah, we still have many senior mashayikh alive, many noble people alive. But I would say this, and forgive me, Dr. Shadee, if I'm going to say something that maybe some people might not like in your comments, or perhaps, so forgive me for that. But this is really the distinction of Ahl Sunnah. That what you really want to find are traditional Sunni ulama. And I really mean that. That you need to find people that have not been tainted by any type of ideology, even if it is calling itself Islami, that is reductionist in its core. Like, you don't want anything to do with that. You don't want anything to do with any type of groups that really are going to diminish the merit of the Holy Prophet والسلام, and diminish his role. You don't want anybody that's going to reduce religion just to do's and don'ts, and is going to attack some of the greatest awliya of our history and past. And so I think for that reason. Now, one thing that Sayyidi al-Habib Umar once said, he said that if you find yourself in a place that you do not have access to Allah's awliya, which is, there's always awliya of Allah, but if you find yourself in a situation, he said, then sit with their books, with the books of al-Qawm. I don't mean the books of just of ilm, the books of al-Qawm. And as you know, in the Rawha, even till this day, every day after Asr, they read a number of the books of al-Qawm to Habib Umar, maybe 6-7 books they'll be reading. And he said, read the books of al-Qawm. Why? Because if you couldn't find those people, then at least be in conversation with them. And the barakah of those books and those authors and what they wrote, inshallah, that you will benefit from that barakah. Also, one thing that he once said was, he said that there are people that their bodies are far, but وَقُلُوبُهُمْ هُنَا, right? But their hearts are here. And there are some people whose bodies may be here, but their hearts are far. And so I think, maybe that's a different point, but I think if people make dua, they look for righteous Sunni ulama with traditional asanid. And I don't just mean a sanad in a hadith or in a text. I mean a sanad to transmit religion in general. I think that's one of the most important things that you can do, because of learning that manhaj and that adab from them. That's what I would say. Allahu a'lam, but I don't think Allah would leave anybody in despair without finding those sorts of people.
If you are on Instagram, hop over to YouTube, Safina Society's channel, to listen to myself speaking with Shaykh Shams and Tameez. He is a scholar from England. I know he's not going to call himself a scholar, but we also introduced him as Mullah Shams. But he also has a course coming up that you could study with, and we're going to talk about that course soon. But we're talking right now on the confidence of Muslim, building a strong Muslim persona, from whether it's youth or adults. It comes from sitting with those who sat with those who sat with those who sat with those, all the way back to the Messenger, peace be upon him. This is something only this deen has. That's the Sanad. We are a religion of the connected chain. That's one of the hallmarks of Ahl Sunnah. You're not just connecting knowledge and verifying knowledge, you're verifying the application of that knowledge in our times. So how is a sheikh today raising his kids? How does a sheikh go about working in a secular job? How does he remember Allah in these days, in this hectic economy that we live in, that's hyper competitive, where we got to compete 24/7? Things like that. How is he interacting with different masajid that may not exactly be the way we want them to be? How are they reacting to political turmoil? We're not left alone. We're not alone. We have plenty of support, but we have to seek out that support. So, but what happens if we don't have that support? You said you read the books of the Qawm. The Qawm is a word that comes from a hadith that refers to people who are blessed in their gatherings, to the point that they're so blessed that even if somebody were to sit with them who is not one of them, then Allah Ta'ala would forgive that person all their sins and transform their sins into a mountain of good deeds just for sitting with them. So they're called in our tradition al-qawm. It's based upon a hadith. Humul qawm la yashqa bihim jalisun. No one who sits with them will ever leave miserable. It means you sit with them, you come miserable. You sit in their gathering for a while, all this rahmah descends, and then you leave, you feel your heart has been cleaned like a mirror, and you feel happy and good and revived, and you take on life again with new vigor. So that's the qawm. Now let me ask you this question. What are the first books that of the qawm? And were they chapters in hadith books or separate books?
Oh, subhanallah. This area is not an area that I ever feel comfortable speaking about. Can I say before I attempt an answer, I was teaching a class, it's a Kalam class. And so some of the students, mashallah, they liked some of the discussions and they wanted to talk about the Shaykh al-Akbar, Ibn Arabi, etc. And I had Shaykh Sha'rani's Al-Anwar al-Qudsiyya with me. And so I pulled it off my shelf and I said, you know what I do with this book? I kissed it, I put it on my forehead, and I put it down next to me. Mm-hmm. And I said, "This is what I do." And I'm not. That's no showboating. That's honesty. That haula, like these are people that I do not understand, but I trust them. Mm-hmm. However, I would say that if somebody wanted to get a good introduction to see how they write, what they say, what sort of kalam, what sort of discussions that they have, I would really recommend Risalatul Mu'awana, the Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad. The reason being is because it's a great introduction. It's as simple as it can be. Of course, very nuanced, but it's as simple as it can be. And I generally think the works of Imam al-Haddad, why do I say that? The reason why I say that is because Imam al-Haddad modeled himself on the Ghazali method, right? Which means that Imam al-Haddad did not like to delve into unveiling what was unveiled through Kashf, for example. He did not like to involve his readership into areas of understanding that they do not have any way of getting to, right? Because if he was to begin speaking about esoteric experiences the way others have done, like a Shaykh Sha'rani, like a Shaykh al-Akbar, like a Suhrawardi, like others, then the problem is that I can't verify that. Correct. And so what you end up having is you have a split of people. Some that will trust them because their teachers did, and some that will criticize them, and we've seen that. So I think Imam al-Haddad did, even though al-Ghazali does, of course, Imam al-Ghazali does mention certain things, but what does he say in the Ihya? He'll say, and Allah showed me some things here, which if I can't write, right? I can't write. So there was times that even Imam al-Ghazali had to stop his pen. So I think Imam al-Haddad is a great place to start. Obviously, Imam al-Ghazali himself, his Ihya Ulumuddin, his The Marvels of the Heart, I really recommend. These sort of course, they're amazing books to start. But I would say to people, for Allah's sake, and people find this very troubling because again, we live in that Twitter world. We live in that world of deep arrogance and self-righteousness that I can understand everything. Imam al-Haddad says that what I fear for you is, he says, somebody may say, because he actually says, leave some of the things that Ibn Arabi, Shaykh al-Akbar and Imam al-Ghazali mentioned. He says, if you say to me, I'll take what I understand and leave what I don't understand. He said, what I fear for you is what you think you understand. And so I think from that perspective, I would say that do not read those sorts of authors for academic purposes. They were not writing for us, except for those that are people of suluk, people that are going to take the path with a sheikh, and they're going to try and understand those esoteric or experience them. If somebody just wants to know how do I better my life, Imam al-Ghazali's on the Sunnah, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. It's published by Darul Minhaj now. I forget the name. If somebody remembers it in the chat and you know what I'm talking about, then put it in there. Where it's just about a'mal. It's just amal. He just gives you practices to do. Books like the Book of Assistance by Bidayatul Hidayah, the Beginning of Guidance by Imam al-Ghazali, the Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad, Risalatul Mu'awana, where all they're dealing with is how to notice certain problems with your heart and how to rectify your deeds through imitation of the Prophet. I would say that's very, very important. Can I say one other thing? Forgive me. Absolutely what you said, Sayyidi. I think Ash-Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya is the greatest book in Tasawwuf. The Shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ is the greatest book in Tasawwuf. Imitation of the Prophet is Tasawwuf. So I think reading about the life of the Prophet, his description, this is Tasawwuf. Reading those books like Bidayatul Hidayah of Imam al-Ghazali, Risalatul Mu'awana would be an excellent start for somebody that wants to understand what Al-Qawm were doing. But beyond that, it should not be an academic thing. They should not be reading anything beyond that for just the sake of arguing. Because the fact that people read this stuff and then have debates about it is just it's unsettling.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Let's talk about your course. How does that strengthen a Muslim?
So there's a couple of things. Obviously, we're just starting off. The one course that we're trying to do right now, which is aimed at teenagers, actually. Even though the courses that So the idea is the courses that I've been doing up until now have just been on Kalam for adults, and the hope is that they fill in their gaps. And the reason why I did this, if I may indulge here, is that what I noticed, and I'm sure you have and other people have noticed, is that you've got people that are out there that have learned, let's say, about the sifat of Allah, and they're now fighting with, let's say, our brethren from a Salafiyya on some issue, or they've learned a little bit about Ibn Arabi, and now they're going to have a fight about whatever it may be. But when you actually sit down and talk to them, they don't know basic concepts of Aqidah. They don't know what they believe or why they believe it. So what we decided to do was to teach Kalam contextually. What I mean by contextually is to tell them why the arguments are happening, and who they are arguing with, so that they learn a paradigm. So the whole point of, if you take a Kalam course, you shouldn't just come out with knowledge of the Masail of Kalam. You should understand the point of Kalam. Why? Because the Masail may change. So you should understand so what we do, and you could probably test some of the students on this, is that how do you think an Ash'ari will respond to this? How do you think a Maturidi will respond to this? Because you should have learned the usul of these madhahib through reading those texts. This course specifically that I'm really excited about is actually for what we call Key Stage 3 and 4 in the UK. Because, let's be frank, when a 30-something-year-old comes to you, Sayyidi, and says, I've got, this doubt, or why is Islam like that? That makes no sense to me. Or they become theophobic. Or they suddenly, well, why does Islam have this principle? It doesn't make any sense. It goes against, the Human Rights Charter of the United Nations, or whatever it may be. Unpicking or sort of deracinating that shubh or that shak is really difficult. But if you could lay the groundwork, so those shubahat, they bounce off from the very onset, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, that seems to me to be a better idea. Prevention seems to me to be better than cure.
Yeah.
So what I decided with this, and this is just one, like I said, we're new, we're starting, we're just beginning. This one I'm really, really hopeful for, because I want those kids, because I don't know what it's like in America. I know what we learned at the GCSE high school level. I think that's equivalent to you. I know when you study RE or when you study philosophy at A level, which I think you call college, I know the sort of shubahat that people have. I've been through it myself. Other people have been through it. So can I curate a course that deals with that from the beginning in the best way that we can? So they're very confident. Like, we had a course yesterday, a one-day course. It was open for the whole community on the 5 perfect proofs of Islam. Why I did that is because I just wanted those people, young people, 16-year-olds, whatever they are, to walk away saying, you know what, my deen is, subhanAllah, perfect. My deen is perfect. That's what I want. So for me, the maqsad of any course has to be that those students, already we're trying to do it with adults, and I want to build a proper Kalam course that's in English entirely, that's just for them. But for the kids, I want them to get their Islamic studies. They have to get their Aqidah, Fiqh, Tasawwuf, whatever it may be. But the objective of the Confident Muslim Diploma has to be that they come out confident. That it doesn't matter what comes their way in life, they will have that. And I tell you why I say that. Because in my generation, just by being a second generation Kashmiri-born Brit, meaning I was born in England, but my parents were migrants, because there was so much of that traditional Eastern culture, that Kashmiri culture in my house, I feel like it protected us from so much. But now, when my kids are growing up, when this generation is growing up, they're not growing up with that net.
Yeah.
They don't have that net, that safety net. So because they don't have those cultural mechanisms that are in place to help them protect their iman. What do we do now? Do we just leave them to the sharks? No, the Islamic studies programs need to be right. What do I mean by this? I'm not saying that it's not done right, but it can't just be. I'll tell you one thing. The assumption of most Islamic studies programs right now is that the kid is already faithful and will remain faithful, and we just need to give him details about his deen. I want to teach kids with the assumption that they have no faith or they will end up having no faith. That's the difference between what I'm trying to do. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. I don't want to assume anything. I want to give it to them. Because you could assume that with our generation. Astaghfirullah, how dare you ask about X, Y, Z? Fair Allah. And you would. You wouldn't dare question it. I know somebody, he would say, A'udhu billah.
Yep.
But kids today aren't going to do that. They're not going to do that. They don't care for hierarchy.
Yeah, I actually remember a lot of elders, grandparents, had only heard there's something called ridda. They never seen a murtad their whole life. Never seen a murtad.
Subhanallah.
Right.
Subhanallah.
Today, because of TikTok, Aqidah battles, and things like that, people are introduced to Athari. I like to call it Hanbali instead. Ash'ari and Maturidi right away. What are the foundations and the sources of knowledge and foundations of the madhab of the Maturidi Aqidah?
Oh, you're asking the question, sorry. I thought you were going to comment. Specifically the Maturidis?
Specifically Maturidis, yes.
I would say first and foremost, they are almost, of course, identical to the Ash'ari. That's one thing. So generally, the main positions are going to be the same. Where the Maturidis perhaps most significantly differ from the Ash'aris is in the fact that they believe that good and evil, specifically knowledge of God, you are legally obliged to believe in before revelation. This is such an important and huge, and it's a powerful mas'ala. Why I choose, I could choose a number of them. I taught a course on the khilafiyat between the whole lot, but I choose this one. Why? Look at the difference. For Imam al-Ghazali, who's an Ash'ari, if the da'wah does not reach somebody, an Aborigine, let's say, or somebody in the rainforest, if it doesn't reach them, they are not mukallaf meaning legally obliged, morally obliged, meaning they won't be rewarded or punished at the end of it, because there was no Rasul that came to them. However, for the Maturidis, because of a position, a qawl, a statement from Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, which is that because this is so badihi, meaning it's such a self-evident truth that your very aql gives you taklif before revelation. قبل ورود الشرع. That's such a big difference between the two schools, because that sets the tone for how the Maturidis are going to look at aql, how they're going to look at moral ontology, how they're going to understand that entire moral framework. It will come from that. Like, for example, even discussions of wajib can perhaps, and fard and wajib in fiqh, in usul al-fiqh, the difference can fit into these sorts of discussions of the role of the aql, the role of hikmah. For the Maturidis is different, and I would say more nuanced perhaps than it is in the Ash'ari school.
So I understand how you're saying that by your intellect alone you should know you have one creator, but taklif also involves me being threatened with a punishment.
No.
So aql alone does not inform me that if I don't do this right thing, which is to say, we have a God or a creator.
No.
Without that alone, aql alone will not tell me that there's a punishment if I don't do that. So when you say mukallaf, is it punishable? Are you going to be punished when you haven't even been informed that there's a punishment for this?
Exactly, and that is one of the counter arguments. That's a great argument, by the way. I wasn't expecting to come and defend the Maturidi school today. That's fine. It's a great point, Sayyidi, that they're not told that they're necessarily going to be punished. However, in light of if you look at the story of Abraham as well, which they use as a dalil, you have to understand something. You don't know that you're going to be punished, but they're saying, for example, bil badaha, that if I don't eat, I'm going to starve.
Yep.
You don't need to be told. You know it innately. So what the Maturidis are saying is that the aql is such a tool when it comes to ma'rifatullah, that this is such an amar badihi, a self-evident truth, that it's apparent, it's self-evident that you have to do it, and you will be punished accordingly. Now, however, can I just say something, just as a counter? You have to understand something for the Maturidis. Look at their line of reasoning here. Their line of reasoning is, you need a messenger to come and tell you, right? So let me counter this back. Let me push back. You need a messenger to come and tell you. How do you know the messenger is true?
With proofs.
The messenger is true with proofs. The greatest proof being a mu'jiza.
Correct.
So they will say, al-mu'ayyid bil-mu'jiza. They say, what is a mu'jiza? They say, fi'lullah. It's the act of God. Fi'l is the mudaf, meaning, and Allah, meaning it's the act of Allah. So you have to, in order for you to get to the Rasul, to even take him seriously as a proof, you have to already accept there's an Allah that can break the habit of nature. So for what the Maturidis are saying is that if you do not accept God before that, you've got no, otherwise you have a dawr. You're using the messenger to establish the message, and the message to establish the messenger. This is called a dawr. It's a vicious cycle. So they said you have to break it. Now Imam al-Ghazali, being the genius that he is, in the Iqtisad, obviously he gives an argument which the Maturidis naturally don't accept. But he says no. The taklif comes, it's enough for there to be a da'iyah, what he calls a da'iyah. And I don't want to make this into a kalam thing. But he says, if somebody was to run out of a house, say, there's a snake in the house, he said that would be sufficient for you to have tawajjuh.
Correct.
So he says, if a messenger was to...
No, go ahead.
If a messenger was to say, ilahukum ilahun wahid, right? Your Lord is one Lord, and he is a bashir and a nadhir. He gives you the glad tidings of the reward, and he's a warner against the punishment.
Correct.
If he does that, he says, even though it might not be enough to give you taklif, but it's a da'iyah that forces you to have tawajjuh. Once you are able to have tawajjuh, the focus towards it, this is enough for taklif. So therefore there's no dawr. That's how Al-Ghazali tries to get out of the dawr. However, that's not sufficient for the Maturidis, because they say, yeah, somebody could take, a Christian could take your attention that way. You know, somebody else could take your attention that way. What do you know with absolute certainty in your aql is that Allah exists. So again, this is why they never fixed this problem, did they? But this is really where the debate is coming from.
Very good, very good. What would you say is the purpose that the Maturidi school, which we can also ask for Ash'ari school, came into existence? In other words, why does Kalam exist in the first place? It's a very simple question. Why would I need ilm al-Kalam and madhabs and aqidah if I have the hadith of the Prophet and I have the Quran and the verses of the and the sayings of the Salaf right there? Why would I need more people to talk about aqidah?
Don't say ala ra'si wa aini, the asl of deen is the Quran and Sunnah. Of course, it's the Quran and Sunnah always. But it's the same reason why you say kullu fa'il marfu'. It's the same reason why you have grammar. It's the same reason why, like, why are you studying sarf and nahu, like grammar? Because you need to get to the Quran and Sunnah and understand it properly. Likewise, had there not been a reason, had there not been firaq batila, meaning, you used the word zindiq earlier, had you not had misguided sects with their problematic beliefs, you would have no need for Kalam, of course. Why would you? Why would you? Kalam came about, and Kalam is nothing, it's just theology. It's just studying Muslim Aqidah. And it gets philosophical because the questions became philosophical. Now, and I'll tell you what I say to people sometimes when they get upset about this. I say, look, if somebody was to come to you, like God forbid, your family member, and even if you can't answer, you're going to try your best in whatever way you can to try and help them. Even if you don't have the answers, you may have to just submit and say, I don't know the answer, but you're going to at least think about it and stop where you are. With Kalam, Al-Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari was from a misguided sect himself. He was a Mu'tazili. He was raised by Abu Ali al-Jubba'i to take the seat of i'tizal. He falls into doubt, as famously narrated, that he sees the Prophet in his dream, والسلام, when he's in deep depression himself. And the Prophet says to him, what's wrong? And he says, Ya Rasulullah, you know what the issue is. And the Prophet says something, in the dream it says that he holds up the Quran and Sunnah, and he says, this is your scales, what conforms you accept, whatever corresponds you accept, whatever doesn't you reject. Then he goes flip to the other side of being Ahlul Athar and writes as Al-Ibana. Some people are going to probably comment not so nicely about that, but that's the tahqiq from Sheikh Salih al-Ghursi and many other scholars that I heard from them directly. In any case, when he realizes that the Mu'tazila are winning, people don't know how strong the Mu'tazila were. The Mu'tazila took the Abbasid seat. They were literally converting mosques that had on top of the door saying Kalamullah Makhluq.
Subhanallah.
So what people don't understand is that it was a huge problem in that age. And so Allah sent these righteous ulama that defended the Quran and Sunnah, the aqaid of the Muslims, using arguments that are musallam, just like nothing but fact.
Yeah.
This whole project, what's happening here, it's so important, which is to speak in a language that is relevant.
Yeah.
That's all kalam is, nothing more, nothing less. Is there good kalam? Yes. Is there bad kalam? Yes. Yeah, of course there's bad kalam. The kalam of the Mu'tazila is bad. But the theology that defends the Quran and Sunnah is nothing but good. Can I say one last thing, please, if you don't mind? This may seem like a digression, but it's not. If somebody is listening to me now saying, Astaghfirullah, why do you... Let me just tell you something. As somebody that accidentally fell into kalam, I'm not great at it, but it's something that I try at, only to help your aqidah. But if you asked me, and you asked most of the people that are around me that are younger, some of the younger students, I always tell them if I could go back, I would do hadith. Right? But the only reason for the takhassus in kalam, or the attempt at least, is because it's important. That's it. There's no other reason. There's no enjoyment in it. I remember my madrasa is the Ika madrasa in Istanbul, from which I graduated, right? And it was Ramadan 2 years ago. It was my final year. And I remember we were fasting, and we had done a whole day of kalam and mantiq. And I was destroyed. We used the word battered in English. In British English, I don't know if you use it. But I was completely exhausted. I was exhausted. And I remember thinking to myself, I have 2 hours until iftar, 2.5 hours, no, maybe 3 hours. So I had a whole plan. I'm going to get home. I'm going to rest for a bit. And then I'm going to have my iftar. And I was really, really not in a good place. And we were walking out of the Blue Mosque area where the madrasa is. And 2 of my friends were with me. They said, are you going to come to the dars of hadith? And I felt so ashamed to say no, right? That somebody says, do you want to come to the dars of hadith? And you say no. Like, how can I say those 2 things together? So we have this word in Urdu where we use the word beghairat, right? Which means that you have no ghaira, right? You have no chivalry. Yeah, you're shameless. So I said, of course, I didn't even know what the hadith was, what book it was. So we went into the Dawah al-Hadith on the way. And it was Shaykh Hijazi, Shaykh Bassam al-Hijazi, who was teaching the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Be riwayat Sayyidina Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani. And he was teaching. In the madrasa, I didn't even have enough place to sit beyond the tashahhud position. So I'm sat, and I thought I'm going to get destroyed here. It was packed. They were sat around the Shaykh. Wallahi, he read for 2 hours straight.
Subhanallah.
I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I left. I felt like it was fresh morning. I had the whole day ahead of me. That's barakat of hadith. That's the barakah of hadith.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, and so nobody should get this misunderstood that somehow people that talk about kalam or the ashari or something, hadith of the Prophet is our spiritual bread and butter.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Like whatever we're doing, it's like silah. It's like when people pick up weapons to defend the borders of Islam. Think of kalam in that way.
Type, continue for us the story of Imam al-Ash'ari. He wrote the Ibana, then what?
So Imam, from what we know from Imam al-Ash'ari is that he first became Athari and he wrote Kitab al-Ibana and he was there for a while. But remember, I'tizal isn't going away. Yeah. So he wanted to defend the core aqaid of the Muslims by using their terms, using their language. Hence why he began to do so. And it was actually not him. He did not codify the Ash'ari school, by the way. He didn't build it. He was just reasoning, using their tools to do so. This is before huge movements in Kalam. It was actually his grand students, 2 of which most famously, so Ibn Farouk of course is from his students, but from his grand students, the likes of Al-Imam al-Baqilani and the likes of al-Baghdadi. These 2 are the ones that actually codify it into a school. And then from their students are the likes of Al-Juwayni, who really is a master of the tradition, builds it out beautifully, and then Ghazali is a student. By the time you come to Ghazali, Ash'ariism is at its peak in terms of the classical period. This is what we call the classical period of Ash'ariism. Not the early period, but the classical period. This is where it's at its apex, pure theology, very little philosophy. But it's only after Al-Ghazali in the time of Al-Razi that Al-Razi now, the Mu'tazila are dead. Al-Ghazali has dealt with Ibn Sina and the likes of the Hukama, the philosophers. And now Al-Razi is coming into his own. So he is what we call post-classical Ash'ariism, where he opens the door to a wider array of arguments, and the tradition continues on this way. And there's a couple of podcasts that I did with Khairabadi Institute on this that somebody could look at if they want on the entire development of these schools. But Imam al-Ash'ari, what I'm trying to say is he did not codify a school, but he did argue and reason in a certain way that his students and grandstudents then developed into an actual school.
Like a madhab, basically. The founder speaks, he does his work, and the students take the example and fortify it and build it out and define what he left missing, etc. So you're saying that he started as a Mu'tazili, then he swung the opposite way, left off all such argumentation and just studied hadith and athar. Then what caused him to come seemingly back to utilizing or using a hadith as and nonetheless still arguing against whoever he was arguing against?
No, for the same reason that I think we do today. My point is here is that it wasn't like he didn't study hadith or didn't know what the position of the and when I say athari, they weren't called atharis, but what the madhab of the salaf was in aqidah, generally speaking, right? And so when he writes Kitab al-Ibana, according to the tahqiq of many scholars, he's just outlined the basic doctrine of Sunni aqidah. What we all believe, generally speaking, with some wording that does look like it is non-Ash'ari, and there can be ta'wil or whatever made for that, but let's say we accept it. But Imam al-Ash'ari is a man on a journey, you know. What people have to understand, he's a man on a journey. What people have to understand, you know, it's like, sometimes, like one of my favorite people, and I'm sure for most people, is someone like Malcolm X. These were people that weren't fazed by things or people. They were always on a journey. If they found the truth, they went in that way. So I think what people have to understand with Imam al-Ash'ari is that he was on a journey. He was Mu'tazili, he rejects all of that, becomes very basic in his aqidah in terms of what it means, and then he begins defending that aqidah using the arguments of the Mu'tazila, meaning using their style of reasoning.
The tools and the style of reasoning.
That's it.
When the four Imams famously condemn Kalam, how do you answer somebody who says, how could you be a Hanafi or a Maliki? Your own Imam condemned ilm al-kalam. What do you say about that?
The same way they condemn bid'ah. It's the same thing. There's taqsimat of bid'ah that we all accept. The one. Second thing is that I am irrelevant. What's relevant are the scholars of the past. And so if I am a Shafi'i, for example, then I am constantly looking to an-Nawawi. I'm constantly looking to Ibn Hajar. I am constantly looking. Now they were not mutakallimun, but they were broadly Ash'ari. So they were definitely Ash'ari. And you just have to read their works for that. And even I think our brethren from a Salafiyah are recognizing that today. You know, and so there's two schools amongst the Salafis now. One school just makes takfir of them also, and they are despicable creatures, and may Allah guide them. How dare you make takfir of the likes of An-Nawawi and Ibn Hajar? And then you have the other school which says, they're masdar al-talaqqi, which is that they were actually athari, but they dipped and fell into Ash'ariism, which is strange to me. But if anybody has ever read Nuzhatul Nazar fi Tawdih Nukhbat al-Fikr in the Hadith of Ibn Hajar, his entire epistemology is Ash'ari. When you speak about iktisab and daruri and all of his discussion, literally just came. It's like he came from the Sharh al-Aqaid of Taftazani. So please don't give me that. If your epistemology is of a madhab, you are of that madhab. If your usula of a madhab, no.
And did they ever contradict Ash'ari Aqeedah in any of their works?
No, in nothing. So I'm irrelevant. What did Nawawi say? He knows better what a Shafi'i meant. You know, he knows better.
And it must be that they were criticizing the kalam that existed at their time, which was Mu'tazili kalam.
Exactly, mazmum. Right. Even it could be, you could have an Ash'ari today that delves into some type of falsafa that's contradictory that you could say is wrong. You know, but you're right. The kalam of the early period. There's a great book actually about this. If I remember the title, I can maybe put it into this comment section afterwards. Where what the Salaf meant that when they did the dham of kalam, it was the madhmoom kalam that we're speaking about was the kalam of the Mu'tazila.
Yeah.
It was not the kalam that was built by the Ash'ariyah.
So terms, these terminologies may mean one thing in the earlier generations than the later generations. So in the early generations,
Exactly.
when they say kalam, they're meaning Mu'tazila. And it's not because of the nature of responding to shubuhat or doubtful matters and formulating defenses of the faith and trying to answer seemingly contradictory evidences. It's that they did it wrong. And in the process of doing so, ended up outside of Islam. So I'll tell you what, there was a people here in our time, just 10 years ago maybe, they were against da'wah. And they would go off on the du'at. Now, why they just would say the word, oh, this da'wah is a disaster, don't ever get involved in da'wah. The reason is that at that time, there were these traveling du'at, the State Department was funding some of them, and they would end up in mixed gatherings, talking a nice talk with a little bit of Islam in it, and there were all sorts of funny business happening between men and women, including mut'a marriages, and secret double, triple marriages in secret, and all sorts of just being on Instagram and taking, or whatever existed at the time. That to them was da'wah, right? We're not talking about scholars. We're talking about regular people. They were talking about don't ever get involved in da'wah. What they meant was that specific da'wah scene. So when things are just starting up, the terminology is not fixed, and it definitely almost always is not what is meant by that same term centuries later, after everyone's looked at the whole history, looked at the subject matter multiple times, and defined the terms. So that's why when you look at the early ones and they say something, it doesn't always mean what is meant in later times. And that's an important distinction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, because istilah changes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like istilah, the technical terms change.
Tell me about your course. And do you have a poster or a website that I could look at what your course is?
Yeah.
Who wants to study with Shaykh Shams? Listen to this.
Forgive me. I mean, this is seemingly out of character for me.
Yeah.
So somebody can go to openmadrasa.com, openmadrasa.com, and whatever courses currently we have and we will have, they're all on there. The course specifically that I was excited about, that I talked to you about, is this one that's starting in September for teenagers, only because I want to get them started off on the right foot. Now, somebody may be sat there. Can I say something else as well, by the way?
Yes, please do.
Somebody may be saying, oh, is this like an Ash'ari course? No, it's not an Ash'ari course. Mm-hmm. It's an Islamic studies course. And I'm not interested in indoctrinating people into some kind of sect. That's what we're talking about here. But I believe that Islam is a holistic tradition, and something that perhaps we can just, for a few minutes, I would love to hear your thoughts on. And I don't want to take up too much more time. But one of the things that I think is important with a course like this, the Confident Muslim Diploma, is that there needs to be a community for these young people. They need to understand rational proofs for the existence of God. They need to understand why they believe in the Prophet. They need to be given love of the Prophet as much as possible, and that's a gift from God. But they need to at least be shown him. They need to understand what it means to purify your heart. They have to understand that there's a difference between self-respect and arrogance. They need to understand these basic things. I want to provide that space for them. So that is really dear to me. That's like a vision. But we do have lots of adult courses. Currently, I'm teaching level 2 Maturidi Kalam. There's some Arabic using the Ottoman text. We're trying our best to make dua for us. That's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Make dua for us, inshallah ta'ala. And we ask you as well, Shaykhna, to make dua, inshallah ta'ala. Now, Shaykh, you've been asking, can I ask a question?
Yeah, tafaddal.
Which is, okay, so now let's say we at Open Madrasa are trying to create some youngsters that will grow up with the manhaj that we were sort of given, the manhaj that you were talking about earlier. By manhaj, I mean tradition. Manhaj, I mean how you, simple things from, there's a sort of hierarchy, and that you understand that you respect your elders, your parents, your teachers, you respect the salaf, the people gone before you. You respect our tradition. When you're looking today at social media, for example, and there's a lot of influencers and people that they're unhinged. Let's just be frank. I mean, that's the best term I can use. They're unhinged. They're wild.
Yeah.
نعم غير. So
غير
somebody said to me
مهنج. Yeah.
recently, غير مهنج. So
Yeah.
somebody said to me that why is it that you'll have sort of young du'at, let's say, or some people, and they've got millions of followers, some people, right? And you've got your Sunni ulama, Sunni scholars that have studied in madrasas in Egypt or in Yemen or in Istanbul or even in England or whatever it may be, right? But they don't have that sort of following. So ألسنا على حق, كما كان يقول,
Yeah.
right? Like, so what's going on? My answer to this was, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. My answer was that sensationalism is not part of the manhaj. That
Yeah.
sensationalism, which is clickbait, is not part of the manhaj. If it was part of the manhaj, then you would see the mizan, the scales balanced.
Yeah.
But what with Sunni ulama that have to show face to their mashayikh, Sunni ulama that have communities, they would never do anything that will ever contradict that or in any way, put
Ruin
dirt,
it. Yeah.
not ruin that. No, so they're not going to get the clickbait naturally. That's one of the reasons. How do you? One, I'd love to hear your comments on that. Number two, well, how do we? Because you're seeing what's happening now. No one cares what the truth is. They just want to go for it. How do you navigate that? Where you're saying to this young 18, 19-year-old, Habibi, please stop posting sectarianism on Twitter
Yeah.
and come and study properly, fill in all the gaps of your knowledge, and then move along. What do you do with these two things?
I've noticed that very few interactions beneficial, fruitful interactions will outweigh tons of social media posts. And our method, our manhaj, as you said, we have communities to show up to. We have respectable people to live with who rely upon us, who trust us with their kids in some cases when they send their kids to study with us. Acting like a clown and a buffoon is not something that's in our wheelhouse. It's not something that we can do. We have people who, shiyukh, who are also, in some sense, cheering us on. Also, in another sense, we have to show face in front of them. We have to behave in front of them. We got to be behaved. We have they have communities of ilm. You have to not act like someone who's one of these narcissists seeking attention, acting like a buffoon or a clown, or controversial, or throwing gas on issues that really that shouldn't be brought up in front of everybody. But so for that reason, we can't play that game. But that game is very weak. The influence dies real fast, and the impact is very soft. So the impact is positive in getting your attention, but does it convert your attention to conviction? Only actual studying can do that. So it's not totally empty of impact, but if its impact is misguided, I don't worry so much anymore, because I've actually literally have seen Shabab go 3 and 4 years in that world of just, these little 10-second clips and maybe a whole video. But as soon as you meet one person of who can correct this, it's corrected. For that reason, I don't worry so much about these huge accounts. And on top of that, by the way, they're not even authentic. It's purchased. Nothing is organic anymore. Marketing people tell me nothing's organic. It's purchased. This stuff is purchased, right? And if you actually look at a lot of the followers of a lot of things, a lot of it is purchased. And it's just nameless accounts and naked women and all these things. And there's like, why would these people follow, Aqidah.com or whatever the account is, right? It's not. It's fake, right? It's farmed. But in any event, I do recognize there is benefit. They are drawing attention. But are you converting attention to conviction over the long run? And I think that nothing is going to solve that except actual humans that you deal with. And even if you deal with humans over the long run online, virtually, because not everyone has a community. A lot of people who love the deen, they don't have a community, but they can have an online community. They can have a virtual community. Even the virtual community will fix you over time. SubhanAllah. Like a WhatsApp group, a virtual community where you make genuine friends. Maybe you meet once or twice at Umrah or something, or you visit them once or twice physically. And even if you don't, but a virtual community led by scholars can fix a lot of those misguided ideas that are being spread. That's my reaction to those and my take on accounts that are misguided, I would say, in some aspects. Not all aspects, misguided. The method in which they do it, maybe we can't do it if you're in respectable society. But nonetheless, there is some benefit, and whatever's not, I trust and I have certainty can be fixed very easily with live interactions. Yeah. That's why I don't think there's a need to compete in that. And secondly, you want to have a dawah that's online that can age. How long can you be a clown online and a rabble rouser? Can you be 60 years old and a rabble rouser? Right? Like maybe you can. I mean, Donald Trump is like that, right? The guy's like 80 and he still acts like that. But as a Muslim, how long are you going to go with this? Right? Aren't your kids going to say, come on, dad, like, cool it off a little bit? Are you and your wife going to be do these people go to house invitations? Like, how do you show up to dinner at your friend's house? We're all couples coming with their families, right? How do you show up after acting like a clown all day online? And being so controversial. How do you have friends? How do you go to Eid? I wonder how these people show up. But the way that we should use social media is a way that can last forever until you're 80. You're putting up stuff that benefits people without compromising what we call muru'ah. Muru'ah, just like dignity and things. That's how I think people should use social media. Look at Habib Omar use social media. A lot of shuyukh use social media, and they don't lose their dignity. They could keep doing that till they're 80. They're not trying to chase anything. They're just putting the fa'idah out there. The fa'idah is the benefit. Yeah.
But how do you know with a lot of, let's say, young people, naturally they look up to those people. They want to be those people. And they realize, well, if I have a camera, I don't need to go and do the 10, 15, 20 years of study.
Yeah.
What a waste of time that is. I can just get that now. So all I need is a camera. If I'm gifted in speech and I'm articulate and I read a little bit, I can just go for it. And because there's no checks and balances. If it was a Muslim world, traditionally there'd be accountability. If you had a community, there'd be accountability. There's no accountability. So
I'll tell you
that's one big problem.
I'll tell you what I would say to such a person. And if you're on Instagram, the Instagram doesn't have a horizontal, so hop over to YouTube, Sufyan Sadi's YouTube channel, to see the whole picture. But if a high schooler drops out of school and he says, hey guys, I got a job at a pizzeria. Look, I make $200 a week, right? Working at a pizzeria. Why go to school? Right? I make $200 a week right here. I make $1,000 a month, $800 a month at the pizzeria. Right? And he's looking over at his high school classmates who are studying physics and biology, and they don't have $800 a week. So he's impressed. Now, next month, he's got $1,600. Month after that, 2 months later after that, he's got $3,200. And meanwhile, all his friends are just studying biology and math and chemistry and stuff, right? And every month is cemented in him that, this, I don't need to do this studies. I got money, right? Well, let's fast forward in 10 years. Who has money? Let's see in 15 years who is buying a house and who's not, right? So that's the analogy here. That's the analogy of somebody. So I would just say, you know what? You want to go that route? Go ahead and do it. I don't think it's a great idea, but do it, because you're going to learn you have to learn the hard way. You're going to learn after a while that everything you're saying contradicts each other. You're going to get flamed. You're going to get torn down. You're going to get exposed, right? Facades can't last forever. And you see that outside of Islam with, people who put themselves off as very wealthy playboys and businessmen, and it turns out it's all rented. They're all hired people. No one is actually there with them. It's just hired models. It's hired houses that they are filming in front of. I guarantee you, every Instagrammer that's selling you his courses, I'll teach you how to get rich, and he comes out of a beautiful pool in Beverly Hills. Do you think he owns it? It's rented, right? 5 years later, it's all exposed. It's all rented. right? And their business actually never made money, and the guy never made money, and the whole thing is a grift and a scam. Well, it's the same thing inside of in the world of da'wah. It's let's see over 20, 30 years what the product is. That's really what matters. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. Oh, I think that's a really important message. And I think also, if I could just say one last thing on that, which is that the everything that you said, it's really important. But also, I guess maybe take this opportunity for myself and for other people, which is also to fear Allah in that as well. Because I remember a brother, he made a statement. He was on a podcast and he made a statement about the Maturidis or something. I don't know what he said. Something that they're like Mu'tazila or something like that. And so I messaged him privately, and I said to him, look, that's wrong. You do know that, right? And I said to him that what you really need to do is contact the brother that you did the podcast with, and you need to get that removed. Because everyone that's ever going to listen to you, I mean, you made a mistake. That's fine. That can happen, right? But have you studied anything in Kalam? He said no. And I was like, do you speak Arabic? He said no. And so you've read something online. I don't know where, Wikipedia or I don't know what, and you've come on and you've made a statement that now is recorded for all eternity, essentially, and I don't mean literally all eternity. And everyone that's going to listen to you is gonna take that. So I think from that perspective, and not just that, but what's worse is if you're young and you're giving fatwa, and you're telling people about really important issues, and today we've got big political issues from not just from atheism, but things related to not just transgenderism, but just gender in general, or whatever it may be. This is why I give the people the example about, don't let your hatred for feminism turn you into a red pill peer, is what I call them, right? Where you go so far that way, where you begin to disrespect one of the most sacred things to Muslims, which are their mothers, their sisters, their wives, their daughters, and so you can't. And this is why the Prophet is the greatest role model, alayhi salatu wasalam. So you don't want to go. Don't let your frustrations take over you. So and the reason why I mention that is because I do feel it. I feel it inside. But you have to be very, very careful. And Allah is His deen. We're all gonna وَكُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ anyway. Right? We're all gonna go. The deen was mateen. It will remain.
It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. But you don't want to fall by the wayside either. You don't want to be wasted. And if you've got talents and you're clever, why not just put in a few years of good, solid work? And then who knows what could become of you? So that's really important for the shabab.
It's so important. Have taqwa. Know that there's a process of doing everything has a right and a wrong. And right now, that it's illegal to give financial advice to people without certification. So imagine advice for eternity. Now you're talking aqeedah and things like that for eternity. So it's extremely important. Extremely important. We kept you a long time. Did we put the link, Ya Omar? Link for Open Methods? The course is starting soon. So hop over there and learn. Oh, he's putting it up right now. Yeah. Put the link. There it is. Open Madrasa. ضع الرابط, as they say. Put the link. The rabit is the link, folks. And sign up for the class. So it's pinned. Very good. Very good. We kept you for a long time, but that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to show everyone who is running the Open Madrasa. Someone with a sanad, you could study your aqeedah, become solid, and then pass it on to your friends and your family. So with that, I thank you very much for hopping up, for being on today. It's probably 3 + 6, 9 p.m. in England. Are you in England or Turkey right now?
I'm in England. It's 8 p.m.
8 p.m. Alhamdulillah. So
thank you very much.
Hi, Wickham Sharif, mashallah, good. So, given the long summer days, plus your Hanafi, so Asr is probably, Maghrib is maybe not in yet, but mashallah, jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for coming on. And any other time you want to come on, hop on, and we'll have you every once in a while on the stream, inshallah.
Allah bless you and continue to put blessing in everything that you do.
Ameen.
And Allah keep you with us for a long time.
Ameen. Ameen. Allah Ta'ala keep us all on Sirat al-Mustaqim.
Ameen. Ameen. Barakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.